Hello, I'm Kathleen, and I want to welcome you to today's Godly Play story at Clayton Valley Presbyterian Church. If you've been to Godly Play or you've been watching our video series, you know that we always start at the threshold of this room, welcoming the children to this room. And however we start, whatever teacher happens to be at this circle, we always start the same way. The Lord be with you. One of us will go over, taking our turns, to the circle of the church year. We always want to know where we are. The circle of the church year, a different kind of calendar, a different way of keeping time than the kinds of calendars that we use otherwise. And you can see the yellow arrow pointing to our Sundays. We're going to move to the 6th Sunday in ordinary time, the green and growing Sundays of late spring and summer and even the early fall. Not quite midway through our ordinary time. So many wonderful things happen, though, in the ordinary time. When we come back to the circle, it's time to get ready again. We make our hands still, our bodies still, our mouths still. We want to respect others at the circle so that they can also come close to the story. We're trying to find what's in that story that's just for us today. Because even though you may have heard this story before, or maybe several times before, every time you hear the story, you are different. Every basket, every tray, every parallel box in this room is a different story. And once you've heard a story in this room, it's yours forever. So it's important to know where to find the story in case you want to work with it when we're together in this room. I'm going to go over to the shelves to my right, the stories from the Hebrew Scriptures, the Old Testament. If you've been watching over the last couple of weeks, you know we've told the story of Ruth and of David. Now we're going to tell a story that's kind of in that line. We're coming over here and getting a very heavy story. This is one where I always have to use two hands to carry it. I don't want to drop it. And some of you might even need a teacher to help you to carry it if you want to work with it. This story continues the story we've been telling. I need all of that, plus I have to come back and get the basket. It has more. Let's see. Do I have everything we need? Yeah, I think we do. This is all we need. The people of God had come in to the promised land, the green and growing promised land. When David became king, he joined the people from the north, from Bethlehem and Nazareth, the people from the south in Hebron. They came together and they took back Jerusalem that had been captured and taken from them. Jerusalem became a second city of David, as Bethlehem was. But when David got to Jerusalem, he knew that something was missing. Here it is. It was the Ark of the Covenant that held the stone tablets that had the 10 best ways to live. Had been stolen when the people went into exile. And so David sent his army, and they took back the Ark of the Covenant. When David came back with the Ark, he was dancing in front of it, dancing with happiness. It's sort of shocking for some people to see a king do something like that. He was celebrating. David set up the tent for God, the meeting tent. But he wanted to build a great temple in Jerusalem for the ark. Instead of the ark traveling wherever the people went, it had a home in Jerusalem, and David wanted to create a permanent home. Even though God is everywhere all the time, David wanted to have a place for that presence. But Nathan, the prophet, who came so close to God, and God came so close to Nathan, Nathan told David, no, you have been a king of war. And so it was up to David's son, Solomon, to build that temple. Well, when Solomon became king, he wanted to fulfill his father's dream. And so he sent people far to the north, past Nazareth, past Bethlehem. They went to Lebanon, where the beautiful cedar trees grew. They cut those cedar trees and brought the beautiful, sweet-smelling wood back to Jerusalem. When you work with the story, you can smell the cedar. Solomon sent stone cutters out to the mountains. They went out east to the mountains and they cut huge stones, beautiful stones, out of the mountains and brought them back to be cut to fit. And the temple began to take shape. The foundation and the walls. Everyone had to help in some way to build the temple. They used gold leaf on the pillars. Solomon knew that they still needed everything they'd had in the meeting tent, the tent for God, that had helped them get ready to be close to God's presence. They had the altar of sacrifice to get ready to come into the temple. And the great laver, the basin of water, only bigger and made of bronze. Only the priests could go in the temple. Things were starting to change. They would pass by the table that had the showbread, the 12 loaves for the 12 tribes of Israel. They had the altar for the incense, the sweet-smelling smoke that helped them get ready to be close. And the menorah with its 7 oil lamps. And then they created something very special. Something that only the highest priests could witness. They created the Holy of Holies, the special place where the Ark of the Covenant would be. When they finished, we can put on the roof. We know that it had a roof, but I'll leave it off now just for us to be able to see maybe a little bit better. When they finished, the people saw the temple fill with light, and they knew that God was present there. The king came, Solomon. He stood before the steps of the temple, and the people of Jerusalem and from all over who had come to see this magnificent temple, they came. He gave them a great speech, and he read from the scroll. This is just part of it. I'll read it for you. O Lord God of Israel, there is no God like you, in heaven above or earth beneath, keeping covenant and showing steadfast love for your servants who walk before you with all our hearts. But will God indeed dwell on the earth? Behold, heaven and the highest heaven can't contain you. How much less this house which I have built? Yet have regard to this prayer of your servant and his supplication. Solomon prayed with all the people that God would allow God's name to reside in the temple. Solomon went on to be king for 40 more years, and he was known for being very wise. David was known for writing beautiful poetry and music, and for being a great soldier, a great leader of armies. Solomon was remembered for being wise and for building the temple. The temple that Solomon built was destroyed in a war, and it was rebuilt. And then that one was destroyed again. And then during Jesus' time, the third temple was built. And today, if you go to Jerusalem, there are only just pieces left. So we can wonder, if the temple is gone, where does God's name abide? If the Ark of the Covenant has been lost, where do the 10 best ways to live go on? wonder what part of this story of the temple and of David's son, Solomon. David, who was Ruth's great-grandson, so Solomon was her great-great-grandson. Yeah, what part do you like the best? I wonder if there's a part of the story that you think is really important for us to remember. Maybe a part that you will take away, or a part that you want to make in your work later today. I wonder what part of the story might be about you, where you might be in this story. I wonder if you can see yourself bringing the beautiful, sweet-smelling cedar wood back from Lebanon to make the floors and the walls of the temple. I wonder, in those great crowds that Solomon spoke to and prayed with, I wonder if the children came with their parents. If there's a part of the story that you wonder about. Lots of people like to work with this story. We have a rule, you know, that no more than 2 people can work with a story at the same time, but if you were in this room, some of you might want to work with this because it's fun to put the temple together and take it apart and remember how the people built it. So when you come, I hope you'll want to do that and remember where to find it on the shelf. Perhaps you have things at home where you might want to make a temple of your own or create a beautiful picture of this temple. After we have the work time where we get to think about what the story is to us. After we put our work away, then we come back to the circle, and what we remember about Jesus is that he said he was a servant to all of us, and so we serve one another. We have a feast in this room that we serve to one another. We take turns. Someone brings around the napkin which serves as our table. Someone passes the matzah, the bread, and then a third person brings around the cups with water. You could use juice. We use water. We like the water that is the water of creation, the part of the water that is all water, and the water of freedom, and the water of baptism, and of course, water in the cup that we remember. Before we have our feast, we have a time of getting ready for that, of course. And it's a time of prayer. We use our holding cross. Sometimes it's good to touch something to help us focus on our prayer and what's inside of us and our connection with God. And so we pass the prayer cross around the circle. Each person gets a chance for their own prayer, whether that's out loud or so quietly only God hears it, before it comes back to the storyteller, and we remember and say together the prayer that Jesus taught us so long ago, but is still teaching us today. And then we have our feast. We like to use matzah. It reminds us of the stories of the desert, when the people didn't have time for the bread to rise, and so they just had the matzah. So we have bread, and we remember when Jesus gathered with his friends in the upper room, and he broke the bread after he blessed it and said, "Take and eat all of this. It is my body broken for you." They were so confused. They didn't know what was going to happen. And after they'd eaten, he took the cup and he blessed that too. And he said to take and drink all of it. This is my promise to you, that I will be with you even to the end of the age when you are gathered in my name. And that's what we do. We're gathered here. And in the same way that the people in Solomon's time knew that God was with them in the temple, we know that Jesus keeps his promise and is with us even as we have our feast. So at home, I hope you have some bread or a cracker and some juice or some water, and that you too can remember and share the feast. And until we come together at this circle again, may the Lord bless you and keep you always. Stay safe and stay well.